But I say how grateful I am for the invitation to be here this evening as President of Carlow College to attend the reunion and also to preach here at the Mass for the deceased priests. In remembering the deceased priests, we honour men who were trained for the priesthood in Irish seminaries and who put their gifts and talents at the service of the people they served in their adopted diocese. They were men of faith, men of service, and they were proud Irishmen. As we say in Irish, go dugga dia labba bra comportoid I mask na nevilla. May God give them a lovely, comfortable bed amongst the saints. I'm always struck about how the dates in the foundation of the college chime so well with a date in your own history. 1776, we had the Declaration of Independence here. And in 1782, 6 years later, an old bishop, Bishop Keefe, at the age of 80 and blind, decided to build a higher level institution in Carlow, which would train men for the priesthood and also train lay people for the professions. 1782. And he encountered a lot of opposition to his plans because at that time Ireland, we were under British rule, and we had in place what were called the penal laws, which I suppose can be summed up in one law, which meant that there was no such thing in law as a Catholic. There was no such thing in law as a Catholic. So if you didn't exist in law, you didn't have any of the rights that a person should have. And Catholics were denied all kinds of access, but particularly access to education. So Bishop Keefe had this vision to found a higher level institution in Carlow. As I say, he encountered a lot of opposition because the attitude amongst people at the time was not to draw attention to ourselves, not to bring the British, but to bring the authorities on ourselves. But nevertheless, at the age of 80 and blind, he decided to go ahead, because he had this idea that the penal laws would come to an end in the not too distant future, and he maintained that when they did come to an end, that we should be ready, the diocese should be ready to provide education for those for priesthood and also what was described as for the professionals. 1782, we call it the foundation of the college. The college was standing ready for action in 1785, a fine building, and it stood there empty for 8 years. I often wonder what the people of the town thought as they passed by, looked in and said, oh God, whose idea was that? Is there a white elephant there? Still there, still standing. But nevertheless, in 1793, with the relaxation of the penal laws, the college was ready for action. And that's why it is known as Ireland's oldest seminary. And it trained for over 200 years men for the priesthood, most of them who served in America, Australia and England. And the idea was that they followed the Irish who were transported, the Irish who emigrated, particularly those who had left at the time of the famine. And in addition to Carlow College, men from Thurles, Waterford, Wexford, Kieran's and All Hallows went abroad also to serve on the missions in these countries and more besides. As a student myself at the college from 1985 to 1990, I used to enjoy walking along looking at the ordination class pieces and saw dioceses with names like Adelaide and Tasmania, Rockhampton, Wilcannia, Forbes, Wagga Wagga in Australia, places like Biloxi, Atlanta, Cheyenne, Davenport, Lafayette and Dodge City in America, and many other places on the 5 continents where priests from Carlow College went to minister. I was always struck by pioneering spirit amongst those who felt the call to priesthood, who came to Carlow College and who trained and went abroad. And there was a time when people went abroad and didn't return because it wasn't possible because of modes of transport, etc. So in a sense, maybe up to the 1950s, priests who went abroad perhaps not coming home again and served their lives out in the diocese that had adopted them. So many students passed through the doors of Carlow College. As I say, many trained for the priesthood. Others, like James Finton Lawler, who was a big name in the agrarian reform movement in Ireland, also trained at Carlow College. And we produced Ireland's first Cardinal, Paul Cullen. So as that pioneering spirit, as I must say, was always something that inspired me. And to think that these men came from the four corners of Ireland to train for the priesthood, and what they wanted to do was to go out there and to bring the message of Christ, the message of hope to all the parishes that they served in. Strong, steadfast, resolute, and trying one's utmost are qualities that Jesus expected from his own disciples. And anyone who wanted to follow him had to be ready for that. There was no traipsing after him. The journey to Jerusalem was no joke. And the deceased priests whom we pray for tonight didn't traipse. They served God and their people. And that service continues today in the work that priests ordained from the colleges in Ireland continue to do in the United States. Carlow College, as I say, opened its doors in 1793, so we have 1776 at this point, a big event in the world. And on the other side, we have 1789, which was the French Revolution. So 4 years after the French Revolution, the college opened its doors to train priests and people for the professions. And some of the first priests who taught in the college were French priests fleeing the French Revolution. So there's a great, I suppose, movements of history there. And the American Revolution on one side, the French Revolution on the other side. And there, Carlow College doing its bit. There, Bishop Keefe doing his bit to promote education and to promote training for priests. We are proud of our history as a college, and we learn from our history, but we don't live in the past. We value our Catholic ethos and its educational, and in our educational and extracurricular activities, we seek to promote and instill the Christian values of civility, courtesy and respect. We place a high emphasis and a special emphasis on the integration of knowledge, dialogue between faith and reason, ethical concerns and theological perspectives on all knowledge. And we believe that an education based on this kind of vision promotes interdisciplinarity, which we believe is important in human formation. So the purpose of our college is education. And in Ireland, education is becoming increasingly important as we move into more and more into a knowledge-based society, and as the society itself becomes more complex and interconnected. The enduring value of an arts, humanities and social studies education is an education for life and for the changing times we live in. The college, throughout its centuries, has always been ready to adapt itself to meeting the challenging educational needs of its time. In Ireland, the landscape of higher education is changing, and Carlow College looks forward to playing its part in the provision of education to the community. Over the past 20 years, the college has concentrated on arts, humanities and social studies, and in our 200-year history, we have ordained over 3,000 priests to work on the missions. But since we went down the road with the falling number of seminarians to opening up courses to lay people, since 1994, over 3,000 students have graduated with degrees, humanities, arts, and social studies, citizenship and community. So the number graduating in the last 20 years or so is equal to or exceeds the number of priests ordained in its 200-year history. One of the things I like about our student body is the civic-mindedness of the student body. And one of the issues they have really taken hold of locally is working with the Rohingya community in Carlow. You may be aware of the international crisis surrounding the Rohingya people, and in Carlow we have quite a number of the Rohingya community. And the student body has reached out to them. They're very much part of our life in the college, and they make up most of the membership of the Carlow Cricket Club. So a year ago, when I was asked if we would allow a cricket pitch to be placed on our site for the cricket club, which is mainly made up of the Rohingya community, I was happy to do that. But I was also asked, said to me, should we have no history of cricket? To remind people in the 19th century that cricket was played in the college for 40 to 50 years, so we were actually going back to our past there, but in a sense we were using that to assist the Rohingya community and to allow them to be part of our community. And I think it's again, it's lovely to be part of that and to see that is being led by the student body. For an educational facility which has played a pivotal role in the lives of young people for almost 225 years, as I say, we want to embrace change with our eyes firmly fixed on the future. So we would hope to grow our student population to 1,000 and develop additional courses in the years to come. Also to develop our international program, we have international agreements with St. Ambrose University in Davenport, Iowa. We also have an agreement with the Illinois Consortium, with Carlow University in Pittsburgh, and on my way back I'll stop off in Charlotte to sign a memorandum of understanding with Francis Marion University there, again to promote the international dimension to our student population. In Ireland at the moment, the government wants more regionalisation in terms of a higher level education provision, and we aim to capitalise on that and to consolidate our role as a third level education provider in Carlow and in Leinster. We are a Catholic college providing higher education in an Ireland that's continuing to undergo a further phase in a veritable revolution of its religious culture. Many people outside of Ireland perhaps still believe that Ireland is a bastion of traditional Catholicism. They may be surprised to discover that there are parishes in Dublin where the practice rate is less than 2%. And perhaps on any particular Sunday, about 18% of the Catholic population in the Archdiocese of Dublin attends Mass. This is considerably lower than most parts of Ireland, but nevertheless it is the reality. Certainly there are still many vestiges of popular Mass Catholic culture. For instance, the Marian Shrine at Knock is the second most visited site in Ireland. I would ask you which is the first. It's the Guinness factory in Dublin. Last year, on the last Sunday in July, about 20,000 young people mainly climbed Croagh Patrick, a difficult mountain in a penitential pilgrimage in honour of St. Patrick. In Ireland, the work of priests, by and large, is generally appreciated by the practising and non-practising alike. At the college, the profile of our students reflects the makeup of their age group in general in all matters, including religious practice. I have to say, as a staff member at the college since 1996, I have never experienced a hint of negativity from the student body. I've never experienced any negative reaction from our student body, particularly when we were going through a difficult phase, when we had various reports into child sexual abuse. The student body remained, I would say, I found some of the best support I got was from the student body. I think I got encouragement, support, acceptance and love. I remember the day after the publication of the Murphy Report, which was a publication into child sexual abuse in the Archdiocese of Dublin. It's a horrific report, and we all felt very bad about that. The day after I was in my office, I said I would lie low that day. There was a phone call put into me. The secretary said there was a student on the line for you. And I took the call, and student Angela said, I hope you're not in your office. I said, I am. Get out, she said, because she said, you know, you can't allow this to get in on you. Get out there now and do something. And I said, well, I was saying, well, what would I do? And she said, go out and buy a suit for yourself. I said, I just bought 2 a month ago. Buy another one. So I went out to the tailor shop, and the guy said, you know, oh, we didn't expect we'd see you out today. And we just bought the suit anyway, and got the best bargain I could on the day. But that kind of, could be replicated many times, but that kind of support and encouragement, acceptance by our student body is, again, I think priests in general have experienced that amongst the people, but I think it was wonderful coming from a young person. Similarly, again, in terms of the work we do, one of the things I notice amongst our student body is that I think because of the course we provide, the humanities courses in particular, people 2 years in do a lot of thinking about their faith, and you see people growing in faith, maturing in faith. I remember one guy, Anthony, I interviewed him to come in. Anyone that's over 23 can come in as a mature student. I interviewed him. Along with another staff member, we gave him a place. I just asked him every so often how he was getting on. And remember at the early part of 3rd year, I said to him, well, how is it going for you now? And he said, well, it's going okay actually. I've learned 2 things. And I said, well, that's great. What are they? He said, the first thing I've learned is that theology is a science. I thought it was just a collection of myths. The second thing he said, which blew me away completely, because I don't think I could have said this at his age, and I was a seminarian then. He said, I now know that I am a Catholic, and I know why I am a Catholic. That was very, again, that is replicated, but it was good to hear that on that particular day. We believe that as a Catholic college, it is incumbent upon us to question and understand how the Church in Ireland can better foster interaction between faith and culture, and we intend to make a proposal to the government around that, to say that we could perhaps become a centre for investigating that very idea, because we don't believe that that's happening sufficiently, that interface between faith and culture, between faith and unbelief. And I think we're happy to hopefully get support from that, from the point of view of the research into that area. We tell our students that the Church has undoubtedly a contribution to make to the improvement of society. We also say that that contribution cannot simply be that of being just a political commentator. The principal contribution, we believe, of church institutions in an increasingly secular society is, as Pope Benedict noted in an interview some years ago, to witness to God in a world that has problems finding him, and to make God visible in the human face of Jesus Christ, to offer people access to the source, without which our morale becomes sterile and loses its point of reference. We also say that Christians, Catholics in Ireland, will have to learn to live in an increasingly secularised society, but never in a resigned or passive way. We say that Christians cannot accept retiring from the public domain or accept a vision of the political sphere as somehow absolute. Giving to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's, meaning not just the separation of church and state, but also that Caesar is not God and should not be playing God. We also say that the paradoxical thing is that the farther the church goes in adapting to the culture of the times, the greater is the danger that it will no longer be able to confront the culture of the time. It will only be able to speak the language of the culture of the day, and not the radical newness of the message of the gospel, which transcends all cultures. It could become a type of civil religion, politically correct, but without the cutting edge of the gospel. There is a difficult path to tread between a fundamentalism which would pretend that the church can have its own answer to all questions, and a lack of courage to take up positions which may be culturally unpopular. The conformism of the mid-20th century remains unchallenged because it had support. Every generation must allow the gospel to challenge conformism, even a conformism which calls itself progressive. The Catholic Church in Ireland will have to learn a new manner of being present in society. Recently I was talking to one of the leaders of our Protestant church in Carlow, and he said to me that all our churches were now wearing clothes which do not fit because they had been tailored for us when we were fatter. The answer to today's real religious challenges is not to seek more fashionable clothes to make us look better or to follow the trends of the moment. We need functional clothes of the right fit for the current realities we must face. Christian faith is not just a faith about doctrines or about rules and regulations or about ethical standards against which we must measure our own moral behaviour. It is not just about reforming structures. It is about the ability to preach and witness to the message of Jesus Christ. The message of the church is the message of God, who loves us before any merit on our part. It is a God who reveals, who speaks to us, engages with us, and allows us to understand something of the inner life of God. I want to share a story around that, which had a big impact on me as a priest, about that notion of God speaking to us. I was once, part of my work, a chaplain in a prison in Port at a time when that prison was the main centre where most of the IRA prisoners were kept at a time during the time of the armed struggle in Ireland. So you had on the 4th and 3rd floors of the prison, you had the IRA prisoners, and then you had another group called the INLA, and then the next, I think the first floor was mainly made up of what they called ODCs, ordinary Dublin criminals. Or far from ordinary. But I remember on my first day visiting the prison, I was brought into a cell where there were 3 what were called ODCs, and it was May 2nd, 1997. It was a very humid day, and when I went into the cell, a small cell, 3 prisoners, the prisoners had to get onto their beds so that I could come in and sit down. It was such a small little space. And as you can imagine, on a humid day, there wasn't much ventilation. It wasn't, I suppose, the most pleasant place to be. However, anyway, we had the visit, and during the visit they told me about themselves and their stories and how they hoped that they would, once they got out of prison, that they would make a new beginning, make a new life for themselves. And when it was time to go, I said, thanks very much, I must move on now. They said, oh no, you can't go without having something. And I said, okay. And they said, the best we can offer you is a cup of milk. And so they went off and brought back the milk in a little carton and gave me the cup of milk, and I had the milk. And I then discovered that little carton of milk was their carton of milk for the day, for their tea. And I got almost 3/4 of it. And what struck me about all of that was, in a sense, the cell reminded me of Bethlehem, a feast we've been celebrating in the last week or so, 10 days, and how Jesus was born in the squalor of a stable. The talking and the sharing, which was deep, it was like the liturgy of the Word. And what really got me was the sharing of that milk. It was Eucharistic. And milk, such a vital substance that from the moment we're born we need it. And it's so crucial for us. And I felt in that moment, the basic essentials were there of our faith. And it's a memory that I will always cherish, and that God in that situation taught me so much and used that situation, those men, the ODCs, to teach a very important lesson. But as I was leaving them, I said, you know, you were talking about hope and what gives you hope. And one of them said, well, what gives me hope is, he pulled out of his pocket a poem called Begin by Brendan Kennelly. And it talks about beginning again each day. And I think I may conclude with that as we're at the beginning of a new year, and all of us here are involved in different projects, different things in our families, and perhaps some of us are wondering, you know, have we the energy to keep going, or maybe some of the stuff we're involved with is a bit too much for us. I think the sentiments of this poem, I think, are encouraging, and they invite us to begin again. So Brendan Kennelly is one of our island's best known modern poets, and I'll conclude with that poem. It says, begin again to the summoning birds, to the sight of light in the window. Begin to the roar of morning traffic all along Pembroke Road. Every beginning is a promise, born in light and dying in dark, determination and exaltation of springtime, flowering the way to work. Begin again to the pageant of queuing girls, the arrogant loneliness of swans in the canal, bridges linking the past and future, old friends passing through with us still. Begin to the loneliness that cannot end, since it perhaps is what makes us begin. Begin to wonder at unknown faces, at crying birds in the sudden rain, at branches stark in the willing sunlight, at seagulls foraging for bread, at couples sharing a sunny secret, all together while making good. Though we live in a world that dreams of ending, that always seems about to give in, something that will not acknowledge conclusion insists that we forever